On your Spooky generator, if you want to run 100% positive offset, where it's going like from 0 volts up to positive volts. Now I moved the 0 line down a little bit so you can see the graduations more clearly. Each one of these graduations is going to be 5 volts, but you want to actually keep it simple if you're using 100% positive offset, and that is with when you're using both outputs. So you're going to put out a full 20 volts. And actually, I want to remark on that. Actually, it seems like the generator has a limit. It will not put out 0 to 40 volts. It'll put out from minus 20 up to plus 20. It'll do 40 volt swings, but it will not put out 40 volts in one direction. I've noticed that. I think it puts out about a little over 22.3 volts, but that's plenty strong, believe me. But in other words, it won't, like when you're running 100% positive offset, it's not going from 0 to 40 volts. It's going, I think, a max of around 22.3 if I got it correct. But if you're going if you had it on regular, it was going negative. It would go all the way 20 volts negative to minus, and then 20 volts positive. It would be doing 40 volt swing. So I just want to remark about that for positive offset, because Hulda Clark was a big advocate of positive offset. But if you're combining both channels, you're still getting a lot more output by using that. So I set this up. You got to use both wires and use just the red wires. The out 1 should be the positive side, and out 2 should be the negative side, depending on how you actually. So in other words, if you put, well, actually out 2 will be the 0 side, I guess you would say, not a negative side. So you would say out 1 here, you would say 100% positive offset, and out 2 minus 100% with inverse sync down here, and add F1 to F2. And I was trying to mess around with the harmonics, and this program works absolutely great with the harmonics and everything, but if you try to just run 100% positive offset on both channels, you're probably, in my opinion, from my humble opinion, you're probably better off just keeping it simple and just making a nice square wave. Because if you're running 100% positive offset with the dampened square wave or something like that, it's not going to 0 that much. It's those waves aren't really designed for running 100% positive offset. You want to just run the simple square wave. I'm really thinking that. I've been messing around with this for a while, and I'm pretty much sold on 100% positive offset. So what I have here is the 0 line is down here. I adjusted it so you could see in increments. It's 5, 10, 15, 20. Actually, it goes to about 22.3 volts total output from 0 to 22.3 volts is the maximum output. Like if you're not running positive offset, it'll go from minus 20 to plus 20, a 40 volt swing. But if you run positive offset, it's not going to put out 0 to 40 volts. But either way, I mean, it's still 20 volts is plenty. Actually, it looks like 22.3 volts. So I was kind of, well, let me just point out something. If you, say for instance, we stop this, just to make it clear as mud, but if you went to a dampened square wave, I'm just saying, if you're going to run 100% positive offset, I really think you should set it up like this. This is the way I am doing it. Now that it's got this scope, I'm doing 100% on 1, minus 100% on 2 with inverse sync. And just add F1 to F2. No harmonics or anything. And out 1 is going to be where the positive side is. So if you want to run, a 4-point contact system, out 1, when you have this set up here, the to 100%, that's going to be, that would be the positive side. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. If you looked at Hulda Clark's work about the 4-point contact system with 3 points positive, you'd want the 3 points positive from out 1 if you have it set up this way. But 20 volts is plenty potent. Believe me, it is. It's plenty potent. You don't need to be going up higher than that anyway. But let's say, for instance, we ran a dampened square wave, and I'm going to have to adjust this when I run this to, yeah. Oh, there it is. It gets kind of funky. In other words, the zero line is down here on the bottom. It's not going to zero that much. The dampened square wave is really kind of not designed for being running with positive offset, in my opinion. I think you want to run just a plain square wave. And when you run harmonics, it even gets crazier than that. It doesn't go to zero that much as you want it to. And it doesn't have as much swings in electricity. Like, in other words, it'll go from 0 to 10 and from 10 to 20, even if you've got full output going. So, and I want to note too that when you're running 100% positive offset, if you set this higher than 11, it's really, that's all she'll do. When you're running it without running the positive one offset, then you can run the 20. Then you can run the 20 and it makes a difference. But when you're combining both channels, it looks like the most you're going to get out of like a swing in voltage is to go up to, I think, 22.3. Without running just 100% positive offset and running it the regular way, it'll go from plus 20 down to minus 20, plus 20. Then you can set this because actually if I set this up higher to 20, and let's change the square wave back, and I go run it, and it's loading waveforms, it will not go past where it was. Because I guess there's a, let me change this now. Yeah, it doesn't go past where it was. It was like, it's 5, 10, 15, 20, about 20, a little hair over 22, 23 volts. That's all she's getting. And that's because when this thing says 20 volts, that's 20 volts point to point. So it's 10 up, 10 down. So that's what's going on. Now, if we take this, let me shut this camera off. Okay, so I put a full 20 volts in here, and I got it where it's no positive offset. It's just going to run inverse sync, and you can see it goes from, it's practically off the screen. I centered it on 0 again. Let me show you. Like, if I pause this, I put the 0 mark here. So if we're counting down 5, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that's 4 times 5 is 20 volts, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 20 volts up. So if I let it run, it goes 20 volts up and 20 volts down. So you got a 40 volt swing. But you're not going to get past that. Actually, the max, when you're doing a 100% positive offset, it's not going to go to 0 to 40. It goes to about 20, I think it's 22.3 is my best measurement, 22.3 volts. But that's still plenty. But I'm going to be running, if I'm attempting to knock out a microbe in contact mode, I'm going to be running positive offset like as such, 100% on channel 1, minus 100% on channel 2, with inverse sync down here, because when that's inverse sync, that actually makes channel 2 positive. Okay, and then add F1 to F2. Then actually I'm going to have to, you'll see it's going to actually go right off the screen, maybe a little, well, not quite. Yeah, it actually goes a little higher than 20 volts. It actually goes a little bit higher. Like if I bring this down, I shut this off a second, and I bring this down to here, use that as a 0 line, and I start it again. You can see it actually goes up 5, 10, 15, 20, and a little bit higher. It's like about 22. It's about 22.3 volts. It actually goes a hair higher. So, but where you are, if you set it up that way, where out 1 says 100% and out 2 says minus 100 for negative offset with inverse sync, what's going to happen is your out 1 off of this, off of here, that channel right here, your out 1 is going to be your positive, and the other one is going to be your 0. So if you want to do the 4-point Hulda Clark zapping, where you're doing 3 points positive, 1 point negative, in other words, the 2 foot plates would be positive, and one arm would be positive handheld, and the other arm would be negative. You would want to make sure you're using out 1 as that's set up. And you know, the harmonics is great, the dampened wave, square wave is great, but if you're using 100% positive offset, you're probably just, you know, I'm looking at it, you're probably just better off just using a plain old square wave. That is if you're just using 100% positive offset. Because I was messing around this for some hours, and this is about the best way. Like I said, this is the 0 line. I moved it down to here, so that's the best way it goes. And you know what Hulda Clark said about this was that microbes are basically positively charged, so when you're hitting it with a positive charge, it's shortening them out. And you know, even without even hitting the correct frequency, that's her claim anyway. And she says that, so when you're combining that with the correct frequency, I'm thinking it's even more potent. That's my theory anyway. I'm thinking that way. And so I'm pretty adamant on, I think positive offset is a very important tool. But like I said, it looks like you have to set it up nice and simple with just a plain square wave. 100% on number 1, minus 100 on out 2 with inverse sync. And you know, when you're just going to remember that out 1 is going to be the positive side. So if you want to run 3 points positive, 1 negative, you're going to be running the 3 points from the positive side. And the other thing she talked about is that when you're running this, like I want to adjust this back up here again. I did this because I can make the increments like the voltage increments times 10, but I figure I'm getting a more accurate measurement when I'm using a larger part of this screen with this old analog scope. But she also stated that when you're using 100% positive offset, it works as from my understanding, it works as an electron donor for the white blood cells, and kind of supercharges them up, and it's almost like a battery charge for them. All our cells in the body are like kind of like little mini batteries that are extremely low, minus quarter volt voltage. So the positive offset, according to her, actually will cause the white blood cells that are like minimized in electrical charge to be charged up even stronger, and it'll work like super white blood cells. That's her claims. But now that I'm understanding about the alkaline and the acidic part of the body, for instance, I'm going to just ad lib on here for a second. Like if you have an alkaline pH, that's the same as saying you have a negative charge. If you have an acidic pH, which is usually like the microbes and stuff are acidic, or cells that turn cancerous or really bad, those are the acidic pH and also positively charged. And the theory is, according to Hulda Clark, that the positive offset, and when it's going 100% positive offset, it's actually shorting out positively charged microbes and cells that are, she claims, that's her claims, that are cancerous. So that's, so I'm thinking, wow, you want to use positive offset. and try to use a frequency that's the correct one, for whatever microbe you're trying to get. So I put on here the Hong Kong flu virus. I don't know if that would be the deal or what, but that's, I guess the experimenters have determined, and I don't know how accurate all these lists are with all these frequencies. Like, some people say some of them work better than others. And just to tell you, the typical ones that, well, I won't get into that. I think I have that on other videos, but some of these frequencies are like 20, 464, 465 in that range, 727 to 728 in that range, 787 and 880 are extremely commonly used on these charts. So, if people don't believe in this theory, I think it's got some merit to it someplace, even if you're a total non-believer. I'm not going to be able to determine if it's how accurate everything is, but I'm just stating that, per the best knowledge that I gleaned from studying from sources that I think are fairly solid. And I think Hulda Clark had some things that were inaccurate, but her basics were very, very good. Even though some of the things she stated were probably went too far on a tangent, but some of the basics are very, very good. So I'm very much adamant on 100% positive offset. So you want to set it up nice and simple, nice and simple. Square wave, inverse sync, using both outs. And since you're using inverse sync, you would use 100% on positive 1 and minus 100% on positive 2. Alright, so nothing fancy when you're using positive offset, in my humble opinion.